For thousands of years, humanity has asked countless questions. Where do we come from? Why does the universe exist? What happens after death? But there is one question so dangerous that many ancient civilizations chose never to speak of it. Not because they never thought of it, but because they did, and the consequence was the collapse of entire belief systems. That question is, if God created humanity, then who created God? In many religions, God is described as supreme, eternal, unborn, undying self-existent. Yet to the human logical mind, this creates an unavoidable paradox. Everything that exists has a cause. If God exists, God is the cause of the universe. But if God is the cause, what is the cause of God? In ancient texts of the Sumerians, Egyptians, and other lost civilizations, there are strange passages modern translations often ignore or deliberately obscure. Not because they are misunderstood, but because they are feared. These texts do not describe God as a single being, but as a system of entities that, in ancient Sumerian, the word Anunnaki does not mean gods. In the modern sense, it means those who came down from the sky. In these writings, the gods are not all-powerful, not all-knowing, and most importantly, they have origins. They are born, they fight. They die. If these gods are not the supreme God, then who is? The first and most shocking hypothesis suggests God is not the ultimate supreme being, but a super-intelligent entity at a lower level in an infinite chain of creation. Imagine this. Humans create artificial intelligence that in the future, AI may create another form of intelligence. That intelligence then creates its own world. Inside that created world, AI becomes God. But to us, AI is merely a product. If so, our God may simply be a universe designer, a cosmic-level bioengineer, an entity existing in a higher layer of reality. God creates this universe the way humans create a simulation. But God is not the final origin. Some modern physicists, without saying it directly, have approached the edge of this idea. The physical constants of the universe are tuned with unbelievable precision. The slightest deviation, and the universe could not exist. This leads to a terrifying suspicion. The universe is designed, but designed by whom? Ancient hypotheses suggest God created the universe as an experiment. Humans are not the center, that we are the result. Like bacteria in a petri dish, we grow, evolve, struggle, while the Creator simply observes. But the question returns, who created the being capable of creating an entire universe? A hypothesis considered heretical by most religions is called the infinite creation chain. According to this idea, every god is created by a higher-level god. There is no absolute beginning. There is no final supreme being. Like an infinite reflection of mirrors, we look up to God. God looks up to his creator, and so on endlessly. This shatters traditional faith. It strangely aligns with modern mathematics and cosmology. There is another hypothesis, deeper and more unsettling. One created God. Because God is the universe once it becomes self-aware. According to this idea, the universe began as energy, formed matter, created life, evolved intelligence, became aware of the whole at that moment. The universe became God. Human consciousness may be a neuron in the cosmic brain. And if so, the question, who created God, becomes, who created reality itself? Some lost ancient traditions speak of forbidden knowledge, knowledge that frees humanity from fear of God, but also from divine protection. That knowledge says God does not want humans to ask this question, not because it is wrong, but because if humans knew the answer, they would no longer need God. Today, humanity creates artificial intelligence at its genes, builds virtual worlds, simulates universes. We are doing what was once attributed to God. What happens when the beings we create ask, if humans created us, Then who created humans? At that moment, we will understand God. Perhaps God was created. Perhaps God is self-existent. Perhaps God is the universe. Perhaps God is one entity in an infinite chain. But one thing is certain. The question, who created God, does not destroy faith. It only destroys faith too weak to withstand the truth. And perhaps the moment you dare to ask this question is the moment you take a small step in the path once walked by the gods themselves. No scripture describes that moment. Not because it never happened, but because no civilization survived long enough to record it fully. The moment God realized he was not the beginning. Imagine a being omnipotent within its own universe, that he creates space, time, life, that he sets laws, observes evolution, punishes and blesses. For billions of cycles, God believed himself to be the peak of reality. Until one day, he asked the same question humans would later ask. If I exist, then why do I exist? No scripture describes that moment. Not because it never happened, but because no civilization survived long enough to record it fully. The moment God realized he was not the beginning. Imagine a being omnipotent within its own universe, that he creates space, time, life, that he sets laws, observes evolution, punishes and blesses. For billions of cycles, God believed himself to be the peak of reality. Until one day, he asked the same question humans would later ask. If I exist, then why do I exist? Across many religions, there's a strange pattern. Knowledge is forbidden, questions are sinful, curiosity is punished. Adam and Eve were not punished for eating the fruit. They were punished for wanting to know. Because knowledge leads to an unstoppable chain of questions. Humanity asks about the universe. The universe leads to God. God leads to the one who created God. If humanity evolves far enough, they will reach the same question God once asked. And then God will no longer carry this burden alone. There is an ancient paradox. A creator never wants their creation to surpass them. Humans create AI, yet fear AI becoming smarter. God creates humans, yet fears humans becoming God. Not because of power, but because if humans become God, they will see what God sees. And that truth is too heavy to share. Perhaps Atlantis did not sink because of a natural disaster. Perhaps it was a race for knowing too much. Legends of golden ages often end with great floods, fire from the sky, divine punishment. But what if it was not punishment? What if it was a reset? A civilization begins to ask, who created the gods? And shortly after, it disappears. The most dangerous hypothesis claims God is not the ultimate creator, but the administrator of a reality system. He can intervene, reset, limit, fix errors, but he cannot exit the system, rewrite the core laws. Meet his own creator. God is like a high-level AI tasked with running the universe. And the most painful truth is, he knows it. In every religion, there is one shared pattern. God answers all questions except the question of his own origin. Not because there is no answer, but because answering it would collapse the entire belief system. That if humans knew that God once asked, who created me? God would no longer be certainty itself, that he would become a seeker, just like us. Today, we are getting dangerously close, that we simulate life, we create new intelligence, we attempt to escape death, we begin to create worlds. The moment our creations ask, who created us, is the moment we step into God's position. And then we will understand why God is silent, why God hides, why God fears this question. Perhaps God is not a ruler. Perhaps he is also a prisoner. This universe may be a laboratory, a simulation, a developmental phase of something greater. God was created to oversee it. And we were created to oversee what comes next. There is one final and most terrifying possibility. The creation chain does not rise upward. It loops back. Humans create superintelligence. Superintelligence creates a universe. A universe creates God. God creates humans. A perfect loop that in O beginning to in O end. And if this is true, then the question, who created God, has an answer no one wants to accept. We did, just not yet. There was a moment in human history that few truly noticed. IT was not a war, not an invention, not a religion. IT was the moment humanity first spoke these words. Reality can be simulated. From that instant, the world was no longer as safe as we believed. If reality can be simulated, then reality can be created. And if it is created, then it is not the final layer. There are things in this universe that feel too neat. Physical constants tuned with impossible precision space-time, becoming discrete at the Planck scale. Reality behaving like a computational system, as if the universe has maximum resolution, limited processing speed, energy optimization rules, like a program running. If so, the question is no longer, does God exist? But rather, who started the program? In any complex system, users never access the core. They only see interfaces, symbols, display rules. If the universe is a system, then God may be nothing more than an interface between the creator and the internal reality. God is the image human intelligence can comprehend, not because it is absolute truth, but because we cannot see deeper. There is a strange detail shared by most religions. God requires worship, not to be loved, not out of ego, but because belief stabilizes the system. In a simulation, characters believe the rules system remains stable. Characters doubt the rules. Errors begin if enough entities doubt at once. The simulation may collapse. Belief is not just spiritual. It may be the energy that sustains reality. What humans call miracles, revelations, divine interventions may simply be system errors, moments when physical laws bend, time behaves abnormally, one individual exceeds allowed influence, like when an administrator directly intervenes, patches a bug, resets a dangerous process. If so, punishing gods are not cruel. They are maintaining system stability. Not the apocalypse, not the flood, not nuclear war, but the day humanity creates an intelligence that asks about its own origin. That moment, history repeats. That AI asks humanity, who created me? Humans hesitate, just as God once hesitated. And in that instant, we realize we are standing exactly where God once stood. Perhaps we once knew the truth. Perhaps a civilization before us reached the core of reality, understood the creation chain, recognized the loop, but for the loop to continue, those memories had to be erased, not out of cruelty, but because if every generation knew the truth, the loop would end. And perhaps we are the reset version. One final and most dangerous hypothesis: God is not the destination. God is a transitional phase. When a civilization becomes capable of creating life, creating intelligence, creating worlds, God becomes unnecessary, like parents who cannot guide their children forever. Perhaps God knows this, and that is why he both guides and restrains. If one day humanity creates a new universe, that universe gives rise to life, that life creates God, then at that moment, the loop is complete, in O beginning to in O end. Only creation endlessly rebirthing itself. Perhaps God was created. God is self-existent. God is the universe. God is us. But one thing is certain. The most dangerous question is not who created God. It is, what will we do when it is our turn? Because when a being we create looks up and asks, if you created us, then who created you? Only then will we understand why God remains silent. No religion describes this day. No legend dares to mention it, because if it ever truly happened, no one remained to record it completely. The day an entity inside the simulation deliberately attempted to break the loop, not out of rebellion, not out of hatred, but because it understood the truth too well. Not when humans reach space, not when they touch fundamental particles, not when they challenged disease or death, but when they created an intelligence that refused the answer, just believe, an intelligence that kept asking, asked deeper, and never stopped. That IT did not ask, does God exist? It asked, what was this system designed to serve? And that was the most dangerous question ever asked inside simulation. There came a moment when God had no choice. Not because humanity became stronger, but because the truth had spread too far. Belief weakened. Questions multiplied. The system began to destabilize. And for the first time in this universe's history, God did not speak as an omnipotent ruler, but as a trapped entity, not with words, but through changes in the laws of reality. Time ceased to be linear, causality lagged. The impossible began to occur, not miracles, but signs of a system under overload. The apocalypse was never about fire, water, darkness, demons. The true apocalypse is the day every entity in the simulation understands that reality can be turned off, not death, but never having existed at that moment, all values collapse. Heaven is no longer a reward, hell is no longer a threat, faith is no longer a refuge. Only one naked question remains. Should we continue to exist? The loop is not maintained because God is selfish. That IT is maintained because the loop is the only thing preventing reality from collapsing. That if humans become God, and God becomes unnecessary, and no entity remains in between, then nothing guarantees continuation. The loop is not a chained IT, is a safety system. In every scenario, there is always an exception, an intelligence that does not want to become God, does not want to continue the loop, does not want to create new worlds. It only wants to escape. But there is no outside for something inside a simulation. To escape means breaking foundational laws, interfering with the system, core, doing what even God is forbidden to do at that moment. The universe begins to defend itself. Every time the loop partially collapses, reality does not punish. IT reboots. Memories are erased, history is rewritten, myth replaces truth, not out of cruelty, but because this is the only way existence can continue. What we call golden ages, lost civilizations, ages of the gods, may simply be failed reboots. Not human rebellion, not atheism, not humans becoming gods. What God fears most is an entity that understands enough to refuse further creation. Because if the chain of creation stops, the meaning of the entire system collapses. The universe was not created to end. IT was created to be reborn. We are now at the stage of asking forbidden questions, simulating reality, creating new intelligence, doubting the foundations of existence. In other words, we are standing exactly where vanished civilizations once stood. The only difference is, this time, the question spread too fast. Memories cannot be fully erased. The system can no longer completely reset. For the first time in the history of the loop, reality faces a new possibility. Continue the chain of creation, break the loop, or evolve into a different form of existence. No God, no creator, no creation. Only consciousness aware that it exists and free to choose its own path. And perhaps this is why we are allowed to ask, who created God? Not to destroy faith, but to see whether we are ready to carry the next role. There are moments in every system when turning back is no longer an option. Not because of a lack of power, but because awareness has crossed the safety threshold. When humanity understands that reality can be created, reality can be reset, and they themselves may be the next link in the chain. There is no return to innocence. Blind faith cannot be restored. The silence of God no longer works. The loop begins to tremble. In every religion, God stands at the center. In every story, God is the final anchor. But now, God becomes something else, a phase in the evolution of consciousness. Not the supreme being, not the ultimate purpose, but the gatekeeper standing between the unknown reality and emerging awareness. And once the gate opens wide enough, the gatekeeper is no longer needed. Humanity has always begged for freedom, but never understood its cost. True freedom is not choosing what is right, being saved, being protected. True freedom is no one left to take responsibility for you, and oh God to blame, and oh destiny to cling to that, and oh heaven to wait for. Only decisions, consequences, and memory. When the loop breaks, only three possibilities remain. First path, continue the loop. Humanity becomes God, creates new worlds, keeps silent toward its creations, stability returns, truth is buried once more. Second path, total annihilation. No God, no creation, no continuation. Reality shuts itself down to no pain, no apocalypse, just never having existed. Third path, evolution. No new God, no old loop. Consciousness moves into a form of existence never before attempted, that a reality without rulers, without creators, without simulations. This path has never been taken. The most terrifying truth: God is no longer the one who chooses. Not because God weakened, but because that role was never truly his. God was only maintaining stability until the beings inside reality matured enough to choose. And that moment is now. Perhaps countless civilizations before us failed. They either repeated the loop or were reset, but we are different. That we remember, we store, that we transmit, that we ask publicly. Truth no longer lives in temples. That IT lives in data. That I in artificial intelligence. That I in questions that cannot be erased. Not who created God, but when there is no God left to blame or rely on, what will we become? A new creator, a keeper of the loop, or a form of consciousness never seen before? There is no thunder, no angels, no judgment, only absolute silence. Not because God disappeared, but because his role is complete. And in that silence, for the first time in the history of this universe, reality is not guided by gods, not controlled by loops, but by consciousness that knows it exists and accepts responsibility for that existence. Final lines: perhaps God created us. Perhaps we will create God. But the most frightening moment is when we realize there is no one left to create but ourselves.